There's a story in modern music that's so full of irony, it feels like a dark satire. It's about a teenager from the south side of Chicago who became a global icon by rapping about a war zone. What he presented as his war zone. We're talking about Chief Keef, the undisputed face of drill music. But the ultimate, twisted irony? The city of Chicago, and the world at large, essentially watched him pour gasoline on a raging fire. A gang war fueled by YouTube videos and diss tracks. And then, when the inferno was at its peak, he just left. He took his millions and ran off to a mansion in the suburbs where the only drilling you hear is for a new swimming pool, leaving the very neighborhoods he glorified to deal with the ashes. To understand this, you have to go back to the early 2010s. Chicago was grappling with a horrifying spike in violence. Out of this desperation and chaos, a new, hyperlocal sound emerged: drill. It was raw, nihilistic, and had a brutal, unpolished honesty. And at the absolute center of it was Keith Cozart, a kid on house arrest who called himself Chief Keef. His music videos weren't high-concept productions. They were shaky, handheld clips, filmed in living rooms and on block corners, surrounded by guys with guns. To the outside world, this was the most authentic thing they'd ever seen. Tracks like I Don't Like and Love Sosa weren't just songs. They were digital battle cries, taunts aimed directly at rival gangs, broadcasting street-level conflicts to a global audience. But here's where the accepted narrative gets twisted. If you listen to the voices from the ground, from the people who actually lived in that world, a different word keeps coming up to describe Keef at the time: goofy. Now, in Chicago street slang, a goofy isn't a killer, not a general. There's someone who's loud, who acts tough for the cameras, but isn't really on the front lines. The perception on the streets was that Keef was a mascot, a charismatic frontman whose image was amplified and weaponized. He wasn't the one pulling triggers. He was the one creating the anthems for those who were, and in doing so, making the violence seem not just necessary, but cool. And those anthems had real, deadly consequences. The line between music and street justice completely evaporated. A diss in a song lyric, posted online in the afternoon, could lead to a real-life shooting by nightfall. Rappers would name their dead rivals in songs as a form of disrespect, and that disrespect would be answered with more violence. It was a terrifying, self-perpetuating cycle, and Chief Keef's music was the engine. He wasn't just reflecting the violence, he was actively shaping it, creating a feedback loop where his art directed the actions on the street, and the actions on the street inspired his next track. So as the city reeled, with officials like the mayor publicly blaming Keef's music for the rising body count, something else was happening. The music industry saw a gold rush daily. They flew him out, gave him a multi-million-dollar record deal with Interscope. They saw the danger, the grit, and the authenticity as a product to be packaged and sold. And then, having cashed in, Keef did the most rational thing possible for himself. He got out. He moved to Los Angeles, not some gritty part of LA, but the tranquil, wealthy suburbs. And that's the final, bitter irony. Chief Keef became a symbol of Chicago's violence, a figure so notorious the city itself effectively exiled him, but he was the one who escaped the consequences. He lives in a mansion, safe behind gates. Meanwhile, back in Inglewood, the young people who saw his rise and listened to his music are still there. They're living with the fallout. The so-called goofy, who wasn't doing most of what he rapped about, managed to profit from a war he didn't have to fight to the end. He found his peace in the quietest, safest place imaginable, leaving the city that made him holding the bag.